The thing I keep coming back to is the hug. It was a Friday, late January, the going-away party the office threw together in the third-floor conference room with a sheet cake from Costco and a card everyone had signed. Daniela was the last one to hug me. She held on an extra second, told me the place wasn't going to be the same, and when she pulled back her eyes were wet. I thought that was real. I stored it as real for months afterward, the way you hold on to something warm when everything else has gone cold. What I didn't know yet, what I wouldn't piece together until April, was that Daniela had submitted the paperwork recommending my termination herself, in writing, 6 weeks before that party. She cried at the goodbye she had written. I started at Callaway Group in March of 2021. Mid-sized logistics firm, regional office in Charlotte, maybe 90 people in the building. I was brought in as a senior operations analyst, decent salary, real responsibility, the kind of role I'd been grinding toward for 5 years. Daniela Reyes had been there 3 years already. She sat 2 desks over, walked me through the internal systems my first week, brought me coffee on my second Monday without being asked. I thought I had landed somewhere good. I thought she was someone I could trust. By the summer of 2021 we were collaborating constantly. The company was migrating its entire vendor tracking infrastructure, a massive, ugly, 18-month project that fell primarily to our team. I was running the analysis side. She was coordinating with the external consultants. It was natural that we'd work closely. I didn't think anything of it when I started CCing her on emails to our director, Marcus Webb. She was involved. It made sense to loop her in. What I didn't notice, because I wasn't watching for it, was that she was beginning to reply to those threads above my name. Small things at first. Clarifying a number. Adding a sentence. Framing something I'd said as a question she'd already answered. Marcus ran tight meetings. He rewarded people who spoke first and spoke confidently. Daniela understood that about him in a way I took too long to learn. By October of 2021 I noticed she was walking into his office before our Monday briefings, just 5 minutes, sometimes 10. I assumed she was handling the consultant relationship. She was handling Marcus. Later, a colleague named Pete Hargrove told me she'd been describing the vendor migration to Marcus as something she was leading. Not co-leading. Leading. Pete mentioned it the way you mention something you figure the other person already knows. I didn't confront her. I want to be honest about that. I went quiet. I started keeping better records, saving drafts, time-stamping my own work, printing email threads. There was a version of me that thought documentation would be enough. That the work would speak for itself eventually, and Marcus would see the actual origin of things. I believed that the way you believe something that makes you feel less helpless. February 2022. The vendor migration wrapped. Marcus sent a company-wide email thanking the project team. Daniela's name was first. Mine was fourth, after 2 consultants who had billed us $340,000 and barely showed up past October. I sat at my desk and read it 3 times. I forwarded the email to my personal account. I went home and didn't sleep well for a week. Something had shifted and I could feel it, but I couldn't name it yet. In April 2022, I was passed over for a senior manager role I had formally applied for. Marcus gave me feedback in a 15-minute meeting. He used the phrase visibility with leadership twice. He said some concerns had been raised about my communication style. He didn't tell me who raised them. When I asked directly, he looked at his laptop and said it was part of a broader pattern of feedback from multiple sources. I left that meeting and sat in my car in the parking garage on Tryon Street for 40 minutes. The communication style comment kept returning to me. I had never received that feedback before, not at Callaway, not anywhere. I asked 2 colleagues I trusted. Both of them looked slightly uncomfortable. One of them, a woman named Renata Cruz, said she'd heard something about an incident at the Q3 client presentation. There had been no incident at the Q3 client presentation. I had presented alone that day because Daniela had called out sick. And then I found out. Pete sent me a message on a Tuesday morning in April. Said he thought I should look at a folder on the shared project drive. Gave me the path. It was a subfolder labeled Internal Comms, Archive. There were emails in there. Printed as PDFs and uploaded. Daniela's emails. To Marcus. To HR. One was dated November 14, 2022. 14 weeks before my going away party. She had described a pattern of behavior. Difficult to collaborate with. Takes credit for shared work. Made a junior employee uncomfortable at a team dinner in September. That dinner, I remembered it. Nothing happened. We went to a Brazilian steakhouse on South Boulevard for someone's birthday. I went home at 9:30. There was a second document. A formal written recommendation. She was recommending a restructure of the analyst team. She had suggested that one senior analyst role be eliminated as redundant. She had written my job title. She had not written my name. She didn't have to. My hands were shaking. I don't mean that as an expression. I forwarded everything to my personal email. I closed the drive. I sat there for a long time. I gave myself 2 days. I needed to be controlled when I walked into that building, because I knew that if I wasn't, it would be used against me, another data point in a file someone was already building. I called a former colleague who now worked in employment law. We spoke for an hour. She told me what I had, what it meant, and what I should do with it. On Thursday morning I went to Marcus's office before his 8 a.m. briefing. I closed the door. I put a folder on his desk, printed copies of everything from the shared drive, alongside my own archived emails with timestamps, my original project files with metadata intact, and a detailed timeline I'd put together showing the vendor migration work, week by week, attributed accurately. I had also printed the company's internal policies on HR documentation and formal complaints. I told Marcus I knew about the recommendation to eliminate my role. I told him I knew it had come from Daniela. I told him I had documentation showing a 2-year pattern of misattributed work and at least one fabricated HR complaint filed under false pretenses. I kept my voice level. I had practiced keeping my voice level. He didn't say anything for a long time. He looked at the folder. He didn't open it, which told me he already knew some of what was in it. When he finally spoke, he said he wasn't aware of the full picture. I told him I understood that. I told him I was giving him the opportunity to be aware of it now, before I took the documentation somewhere else. He asked me what I wanted. That question, what do you want, after 2 years of this? I had an answer prepared, but it still hit me hard when he said it so plainly, like my entire career at that company was a negotiation that had been happening without me at the table. I told him I wanted a written acknowledgement of my contributions to the vendor migration project, a formal investigation into the November HR filing, and a severance package that reflected my actual standing at the company rather than a managed exit. I had the numbers ready. I slid a second page across the desk. He called HR that morning. There were 3 meetings over the following week that I was not in the room for. Daniela was quiet in a way I had never seen her be quiet. She stopped walking past my desk. She took her lunch at a different time. 2 weeks later I signed an agreement. I won't disclose the number, but it was 3 times what they had originally offered me in January. The written acknowledgement is on company letterhead and has Marcus's signature on it. The HR investigation concluded that the November filing contained statements that were unsubstantiated and had not followed proper documentation protocol. That language is careful and corporate and means exactly what you think it means. I left the building for the last time on a Wednesday afternoon. No cake. No card. Daniela was not there. I was told she accepted the senior manager role officially the following Monday. She got what she wanted. That part is true and I won't pretend otherwise. But she got it on record. Every person who will ever sit across a desk from her in a professional setting, every reference check, every background inquiry, there is now a documented HR investigation with her name attached to unsubstantiated claims made against a colleague. She has to carry that. She has to calculate how far it travels every time she moves. I think about the hug sometimes. How she held on that extra second. I think she actually felt something in that moment. Guilt, maybe. Or just the complicated thing that happens when you've spent 8 months dismantling a person and you finally get to watch them walk out the door. The cruelest people I have ever known weren't cold. They were warm at exactly the right moments. That's what made them dangerous. And that, more than the emails, more than the documents, more than any of it, is the thing I will never fully put down.